Too few people are aware of what might be the most cruel and most dangerous thing that Donald Trump has done since resuming the presidency. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about what this problem is and how it affects global health, how this can impact you, and what you can do about it. On January 20th, the day of his inauguration, remember he signed a flurry of executive orders. One of the major problems with these executive orders is that some of them were just not well written. They were not clear. And in many cases, people who wrote these had no idea what they were doing. But in this case, they did know what they were doing. And that's what makes this so cruel and dangerous. So there's this program called PEPFAR. This is the US President's Emergency Plan for AIDS. And this was founded by President George W. Bush in 2003, and it has since saved over 20 million lives. So when Donald Trump and Elon Musk started ripping apart USAID, they stopped PEPFAR. Now what PEPFAR does is it provides medicine and treatment and testing to people who are at risk of HIV/AIDS. This being a communicable disease, we as Americans have an interest in making sure that there are not flare-ups around the world. In the purely most selfish sense, this is a way of protecting Americans. So these billionaires, Trump and Musk, decided to literally and figuratively tear USAID down. And what that meant was that people with the State Department and USAID, foreign aid workers, and countless nonprofit organizations that work hand in hand with the government, they all had to immediately stop what they were doing. Nearly all of USAID's staff were furloughed or laid off. And there was effectively no more oversight over this program that stops HIV and AIDS from spreading. Without warning, people around the world who depend on this program were locked out of the treatment clinics that they go to all the time. Some of these medications keep HIV infections under control, undetectable. But if they go without medication for, say, 6 weeks, it can come back. And with a resumption in the strength of the infection comes the risk of infecting others. Now, you'll hear Republicans like Representative Brian Mast of Florida talk about, oh, no, the funding was resumed. In fact, they just had a hearing in Congress where he said exactly this. But the frontline workers are saying, no, actually, everything is still frozen in many places. In fact, many of the NGOs that implemented this program have already shuttered their doors permanently. And with USAID being completely dismantled, the staff that runs this program just simply don't exist anymore. Now, what Brian Mast isn't telling you is that only a teeny tiny piece of PEPFAR was brought back by the Trump administration. He said $500 million have been reauthorized. But for context, the program had a $6.9 billion budget. And while that sounds like a big number, remember, this is effectively national security. So even if you want to be absolutely selfish and self-interested, that $6.9 billion isn't just saving foreign lives, it's saving American lives. And when the Trump administration issued the order saying who could and who could not receive medications, they made it extraordinarily narrow. Republicans are trying to very specifically influence the behavior of people overseas and not help specific types of people like the LGBTQ community. Again, this is where the cruelty is. The cruelty is the point. So with the implementation of medications and treatment and testing being frozen all over the place, and now that every one of us are so familiar with what a pandemic or epidemic looks like, I think every one of us can imagine what this looks like if it is not treated properly. So I think as the most powerful and wealthy country on the planet, we have an obligation to take care of people who cannot take care of themselves. But I also want to appeal to the people who are purely selfish and only care about the United States. If a deadly communicable disease starts spreading like wildfire, how do you think that's going to impact global trade and the safety of the United States? Obviously, it's not going to be good. So look, if you want to do something about this, it doesn't matter if you're a member of Congress or your senators are Republicans or Democrats, whether they care about everybody in the world or whether they're nationalist. You should be calling them and demanding that USAID stops getting dismantled by Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And if you have to play to an office that you know to be nationalist and selfish, just go with the national security angle. It might feel gross, but if they do the right thing for the wrong reason, they're still doing the right thing. So if you care enough to make these calls, go to 5calls.org, and there's a USAID button that you can click, and it'll give you a script. You enter in your zip code, and it'll find your member of Congress and your 2 senators, and it'll give you their numbers to call. Call during normal business hours. Just use the script about USAID. And if you want to mention something specifically about PEPFAR, there's a really good article on npr.org that you can read about it. So if you're watching this video at night or over the weekend, set a calendar alert to remind you during business hours to make these calls, because this is important and it will save lives.